Hey everyone, and welcome to Backseat Sports. I'm Josh, that's Caleb, and today, oh baby, we have a lot to talk about. Nebraska has a new head coach. Matt Rhule is taking over the program, and we have just so much to discuss around Rhule's history, the potential for Nebraska with Matt Rhule as head coach, and of course, all of the variables, coaching staff, and so much more that we can talk about. So it's going to be a wild one. Caleb, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Today was a very exciting day for Husker football with the head coach and, a specific game that we'll talk about later. But let's just say it went pretty well. And maybe one of those teams isn't going to be in the Big Ten championship anymore. Yeah. Must be tough.
That Iowa corn's not going to taste as good this year. It's just not. But that's not what we're talking about today.
Bummer.
Obviously. I mean, again, Matt Rhule. I mean, there's obviously so many things to like about Rhule. The pros and the cons. We'll be going through it all and debating whether or not this is the best case scenario for Nebraska and sifting through some of the expectations for what we were hoping to get for a head coach in Nebraska and seeing how Rhule stacks up against it. So it's going to be really interesting to say the least. The question was, after Scott Frost got fired early in the season, who was going to be Nebraska's next head coach? Mickey Joseph did a solid job, all things considered, with everything he had to do and, the injuries to, of course, Casey Thompson and dealing with all of those things throughout the season. But now
lots of things
Nebraska's got Matt Rhule on reportedly an 8-year contract. Matt Rhule's 47 years old, coming off of a stint with the Carolina Panthers. He was fired from the Panthers in October after just basically a few weeks into the season. Finished with an 11-27 record, in Carolina. Not ideal. But again, there's so much there that we can talk about. I mean, of course, for Matt Rhule, he chose Nebraska over, teams that reportedly were interested, like Auburn, Arizona State, Colorado, Georgia Tech. Who knows? Maybe even Wisconsin as well. I guess we can kind of start off with some of his history, and then we'll get into some of the more opinion-based things on the hiring and potential other outcomes and everything else. How do you feel about Matt Rhule's history and the fit here at Nebraska?
Yeah, the NFL, you kind of can take what you will with a grain of salt here with the Panthers situation. But then when you look back into the college situation and the things he was able to do at Temple and then do it at a Power 5 school in Baylor, you'll definitely... things that get you excited about as a Nebraska fan.
He inherited Baylor in 2017, coming off of the Baylor scandal. Art Briles fired, and so he inherited a team with tons of turmoil. So in the first year, they went 1-11, but then 7-6, and then 11-1 in the regular season. They ended up losing their last few games, so they finished 11-3. But went from a 1-11 to 11-1 in 3 years, coming off of.
Heard that before.
Yeah, we've heard that before. Exactly. But obviously the turnaround from the scandal is insanely impressive. And then you dated back to Temple as well. First year went 2-10, so not ideal in his first season, but then 6-6, 10-4, 10-3 before getting hired to Baylor. So the college precedent is there. If we're Nebraska and let's just say Baylor just went 11-1 or whatever, and we hired Matt Rhule this season coming off that, we would have been really excited about it. So
yes, no, exactly.
The question is, how much can you really let the NFL really damper those expectations or, really, ruin your excitement?
The shine.
The shine. What do you feel about that? Obviously he wasn't handed the most ideal situation in Carolina either. Look at those quarterbacks he had.
Yeah, Sam Darnold, Teddy Bridgewater, and Baker Mayfield aren't the guys that you're really begging for as an NFL quarterback. Yeah, he had Christian McCaffrey, but he was hurt over half the time he was there.
Yeah.
And, just left after Ron Rivera and stuff like that. You remember back to Josh and I's old first Husker, who's going to be the next head coaching video. I think we were actually one of the first, if not the first, to mention Matt Rhule.
Dude, we were. I genuinely think we might have been the first people to mention it. Early on, we were like, wouldn't it be crazy because he could actually get fired mid-season? And then, what if Nebraska hired him?
Nostradamus is over here. Backseat Sports, most accurate coaching predictions.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, like you said, he was fired after starting 1-4 this year. It's always tough with any college coach that goes to the NFL. And
it's difficult.
When they come back, it's weird with Rhule because he seemed to have lost his shine more than many other coaches who had gone to the NFL and got fired, which is strange because, he might have more excuses than a lot of the head coaches who've gone to the league when it came to some of the personnel he was handed and kind of the mess he was really hired into with the Panthers. General manager Marty Herney, who had been there, he was fired like in 2012, and then they hired Dave Gettleman. Like, oh no. And then they brought in Matt Rhule as head coach, and then they brought Marty Herney back. So they rehired a general manager they had fired. Inherently, it feels like the Panthers have always been a mess. Genuinely am more optimistic about it than many.
Later 2000s for sure, at least for the last 15 years.
Yeah, no doubt. Since they were in a Super Bowl with Cam Newton, sure, and they made a Super Bowl back against the Patriots 2003. But for the most part, besides a one miraculous run with Cam Newton, they've been an absolute mess. So inherently, it's been tough. It's interesting with Matt Rhule, though. Obviously, like we said, coming out of Baylor, he did a lot of really good things there. The question with me is, Rhule's philosophy and how it'll fit into a Big Ten system. How do you feel about Matt Rhule's philosophy and kind of his approach to coaching? Yeah,
I think this is one of the more exciting things that gets the Nebraska fans who love to run the ball. That gets them excited. He obviously, like any coach, some coach speak here. He says you want to eliminate penalties and negative plays, and then he does say the next way you win is in the trenches, run the football and stop the run. You win games by doing that, but if you don't, you can win games by not doing that. But if you don't, you'll never control them. So he's a big control time guy. He wants to be able to control the tempo up front on the lines and dictate the game, which is just a great fit again for the Big Ten. He did the kind of encouraging thing that makes me like him as a head coach is the fact where he wasn't able to do this on the offset at Baylor. So he went to the RPO, even though he did not like doing it, because he knew that's the kind of personnel to fit to try and win games for that season.
12. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Being able to assess the talent you have, adapting and trying to win games with what you got instead of, just forcing the system.
And that's the biggest difference versus Scott Frost, who, he came in and was quoted saying, we're going to make the Big Ten change to us. And Matt Rhule, like you said, he went into the Big 12 and he's like, I have to change my philosophy for the Big 12 and I'm going to do it better than the Big 12. And then, he goes out and has an 11-win season with Baylor in 3 seasons. So I agree with you. And like you said, at Temple, they wanted to run the ball. They loved running the ball at Temple. And then he comes to Baylor and he's like, we got to throw this dang thing. And so he used RPOs to get those 5 or 6 yard passes as their running game. And it worked great. And so it's interesting with Rhule's history, obviously, because he's kind of been all over the field when it comes to his coaching. He was a walk-on at Penn State back in the Joe Paterno days at linebacker on the defensive side. But basically all of his coaching has been on the offensive side. So he's coached QB, he's coached offensive line, even in the NFL with the Giants back in 2012, tight ends. He's been an offensive coordinator in college football. And so he's really been all over the place, with Temple as a coordinator, then as a head coach. And so I think it's really fascinating to see his well-rounded coaching style, which is why it overall makes sense that he's now, a head coach back in the Power 5.
Yeah, I agree. Again, he's known kind of like what Mickey had reestablished is that old school practice style of lots of contact in the game.
It fits with Mickey's approach.
You got to hit people. That's the whole job. So it's a contact gladiatorial sport, as Mickey said earlier this season. So again, that kind of philosophy, I think, that's a big ingrained into Nebraska's DNA of what we are as tough smash mouth football. And I think that can be some more of that. And I think Mickey tried to do that this year too. We saw in the Rutgers game, in those games that we really dominated towards the end as we started to be able to pound the football. And Mickey tried to do this year in the second half. It's just our offensive line could not hang with the Minnesotas, Wisconsin's, or even Iowa's. Again, we were able to, not respect our opponents so much because, again, this isn't the Big 12 where they're going to be passing for tons of yards. They want to run. They want to, push the lines. That's where it is. It's in the trenches. Yeah. And I think that this will be a good fit again. If you have to be a football guy to be able to go through those NFL interviews and get the job, even if you're not successful. And again, success at a couple programs is also nice as a head coach. Scott Frost, he had success at UCF as a head coach, but Oregon was only the OC. While Temple isn't a Power 5 program, he was the head coach. He wasn't under somebody else. This was his own doing. Yeah. He does have more experience
of turning programs around.
Being able to do well, and then enough to be able to go to the NFL, which, Scott Frost, even if he wanted to at UCF, there was no way he was getting calls for the NFL.
The 8-year contract too. So, if he works, we're going to have him for the long haul, which is, that's
or a buyout if he wants to leave.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a pretty big win-win contract situation for Nebraska. And like you said, I mean, he's been quoted in the past, like he wants to be that old school guy. He says, I believe in full gear, heavy weightlifting, and the Oklahoma drill, baby. Like he wants to have contact in practice and put the guys through the ringer. So it will be interesting to see. I mean, like you said, I mean, the Baylor offense, was about like 10 and 11 personnel, and that was 85 to 90% of their snaps at Baylor was from 10 or 11 personnel from shotgun. But like at Temple, it was completely different. So it'll be really interesting to see exactly what type of offense he wants to implement here at Nebraska. And if his quotes stay untrue that he wants to run this thing through the offensive line, then I think we could be seeing a pretty big change in how we want to play football here at Nebraska over the next 2-3 years. So when it comes to the Power 5 experience then, or the Big Ten experience specifically, like, are you worried at all? Or is his flexibility enough for you to be okay with it?
It is tough because we have now, hired a couple coaches being Scott,
Scott just got smoked by the Big Ten.
Yeah, he got smoked.
And so did Mike Riley.
And those were Pac guys, and now we're trying a Big 12 guy. And yes, again, that's why Fickell was so tantalizing, because he had that Ohio State experience. My counter argument is the NFL is much more difficult than the Big Ten ever is. And even if he didn't do well, hopefully he learned a lot about, you just have to be such another level in the NFL, in clock management, people skills. Again, it's just such a different show.
So you'll let his NFL experience kind of suffice as his Big Ten experience.
That's my hope. As long as he was able to adapt, as long as he was able to learn from his, mistakes and failures there, I do feel good. But if he wasn't, and just kind of jaded from that fact in the NFL scenario, then I am worried. Everybody in these next few weeks is going to use the Nick Saban scenario of, he failed at the Cleveland Browns. Duh, everybody's failed at the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah,
and
the Dolphins.
Younger. So I will say though, Mike Riley also too had NFL experience and he sucked. But then I'll also say he had Drew Brees. He had young Drew Brees and could not do anything with him.
Yeah.
So,
Mike Riley went 1-15 and got fired after one season. That's even worse. Yeah, that's way worse.
Matt Rhule survived 3 years. Urban Meyer didn't even survive a year. So
that's fair.
All you Urban people, Urban couldn't even hack it a year in the NFL.
Yeah.
He
hacked his players. That much controversy. Didn't hack the league.
The other good thing about Rhule is he has been able to develop players. We look to see from his classes from Baylor and Temple that he sent guys to the NFL. He was quoted saying, anybody can make it to the NFL. We want guys to be able to get their second contracts there.
That was cheeky from him.
Yeah, I did like that. I thought that was quite a nice statement there.
Like you said, on the recruiting front, I think it's really interesting to break down his recruiting. There are some pros and cons to this. Like you said, the development has been really impressive, but the recruiting numbers haven't really been impressive. So even though he's had solid development and NFL potential here and NFL prospects developed, but it hasn't been really from the high-ranked recruits. So there's kind of a give and take there, and something that we'll have to be interested in seeing in the future. What are your thoughts on kind of like his development and his recruiting?
Yeah, I will say it was kind of difficult time to recruit at Baylor when we look at those times, because they were kind of handcuffed and they lost some of their privileges because of the whole Art Briles scandal. But even still, again, it's not the numbers you want to see, but 39th, 29th, and 40th in the country. It's not totally, irrespectable. And then Temple, 77th, 69th, 82nd, and then 60th in his last year in 2016. So kind of moving up 60th. That's not bad for Temple. It's not definitely where you want to be. And this is where the conversation of Mickey comes into of we need guys that can recruit. And Mickey Joseph is definitely that. He was the head of recruiting. That's why he was also hired last year.
Yeah.
And obviously, clearly, Trey Palmer, 1 year here, he brings in a wide receiver of his and he breaks the school record. It doesn't get much better than that. I really, 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 we all really hope that Mickey gets to stay, because just high character, super good at working, a great coach, great human being, just a great guy for all the rest of the football guys. Still do think he just is such a dazzling draw, because he has guys also that were successful in the NFL.
It's called Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson are about as cool.
Good for a resume.
They're as cool of names as it gets in the NFL. All these college guys, all these
that's
dudes,
who they want to be.
They idolize. They're hitting the gritty because of Justin Jefferson and because of Jamar Chase. Yeah, that's why you see
Trey Palmer
terrible
doing
Mike
it.
Gesicki
Yeah.
and everybody else. And yes, Trey Palmer, because this is so cool.
Justin
by the
Jefferson was
way.
a 3-star recruit. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, it's the shining star resume for a coach.
Bridge the gap between Scott Frost to Matt Rhule, and I think we win more games.
Yeah, I mean, bridging the gap, I think, is the exact statement, because you want to maintain the talent we have on this roster right now without losing the general situation that happens when you hire a new coach, is you lose half the talented guys you got.
And now we'll lose more because of
one.
NIL too now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so it's crucial to maintain some of those guys. I think Mickey is exactly literally
Mickey's the key.
The key to maintaining this roster, and then bringing in even more talent right away. So, and then maintaining the recruiting class that we currently have. Because, I mean, he basically built most of it.
Like a lot of the good stuff that Nebraska is about, like Mickey Joseph is that. I really, really hope he gets to stay.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, the other thing I wanted to say, I think we didn't finish fully the Rhule conversation, some of the players he developed. Because, I mean, like you said, it was very solid. Like at Baylor, he turned a handful of 3-stars into third or second round picks. I mean, guys, even like a Denzel Mims, who he didn't actually recruit, but he was there and came in and was a sophomore and, obviously was developed by Matt Rhule, turned him into a second round pick. Or guys like Terrell Bernard, who was a 3-star, turned him into a third rounder. JT Woods went to the Chargers and in the third round, who was also a 3-star.
Yeah.
So those are just really impressive. And then like you said, 7 drafted players in 2017 and 2018. And just really, really solid from Rhule, from the talent that he developed and recruited. Guys like Tyquan Thornton, obviously a second round pick from the Patriots, who was one of the fastest players in NFL draft history.
Yeah.
Or Jalen Peter, who was a 3-star who went into a second round pick to the Texans. Like, just some really impressive guys.
That's just great to hear, because most of our draft pick, again, turning those small, like 2-star, 3-star guys, that just shows, again, that good development, which is something Nebraska's kind of been missing here.
Yeah.
And
I mean, he even did it at Temple, which, I mean, that's insanely impressied.
That's
like
exciting.
You said, I mean, a 2-star Deion Dawkins, offensive lineman at Temple, literally has turned into one of the best left tackles in the NFL now. He was a second round pick in 2017 and is now the starting left tackle for the Bills. And Hassan Riddick, who was a walk-on 1 year before Rhule got to Temple in 2012, a walk-on at Temple, ended up being the 13th overall pick in the 2017 draft. Hassan Riddick, who went to the Cardinals, who's now with the Eagles and playing great with that great defense. So he has some history of hitting some grand slams on some guys, which we haven't really seen much of at Nebraska the past 4, 5, 6 years. So
I mean, Temple's had more first-round draft picks than us in the last, since he's been there, he's like, there's still been more first-round draft picks at Temple than there has been in Nebraska.
They've produced six draft picks in Rhule's final 2 years at Temple, so that's pretty impressive.
And they were good in the NFL, which again is great. I do love that second contract statement too.
Oh, 100%. So it'll be interesting to see exactly. So, like, obviously the question will be who is hired by Matt Rhule, and we'll probably make a more in-depth video on that for sure. But
predictions video.
One that's interesting is that Phil Snow was Rhule's defensive coordinator at Temple, Baylor, and in Carolina in the NFL. He followed him all the way through, but Snow's now 67 years old, so we'd assume he's not going to be joining Rhule at Nebraska. But that's kind of been the defensive philosophy for Rhule throughout his tenure as head coach in his career. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how he translates that to the Big Ten defensive styles here moving forward.
How would you feel if he was hired?
I mean, I wouldn't be devastated by any means. I mean, obviously you don't hate having NFL defensive coordinator history on your college football team. And obviously a lot of defensive coordinator history with Matt Rhule. So it wouldn't be terrible. I mean, like, obviously, I think all Husker fans have a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth with coaches bringing their all of their assistants with them, Frost and Riley.
Marcus Satterfield right now is at South Carolina right now, and their offensive coordinator, and he was with Rhule for a long time too. So I do think that's pretty interesting. He's like 46 years old. I'm kind of interested to look more into him and what Spencer Rattler and company have been doing with
getting
them.
more information about who potentially could be here over the next, probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks at max, I would assume. So when it comes to Nebraska and the potential outcomes, the things that could have happened or the coaches that could have been here, where do you feel like Rhule ended up on your list of guys that were potential? Were there guys that you hope that Trev had at least had conversations with? And if they turned it down, then Rhule was best case scenario. Like, where are you at with that?
It's pretty high. Again, this was a solid pick. He's done a lot of good stuff. No Husker fan is disappointed this guy had been on the radar. We brought him on the radar, but
right.
He had been on the radar pretty much since this season started for us. I think he's kind of been talked and in people's minds. So it wasn't like an off the wall Mike Riley pick. There wasn't a real guy like Scott Frost where he was like
the grand slam
commodity. Yeah, most of the coaches this year, college football's kind of went as expected. A lot of the same power people have won. There's still like some like. I'm glad we didn't go for like a Lance or a Kleiman personally. I just thought that they were
or
older.
Gary Patterson or something like that.
I didn't kind of want that, that kind of experiment.
Yeah,
again.
There were a lot of real bad potential hires that I think both of us would have been very disappointed with.
I think Fickle was definitely still my number one for sure, just because again, like the amount of things going to college football player.
But again, both of them seemed unbelievably unlikely, which is why we were talking about that in our last video.
Rhule even started to seem unlikely. Now we realize that was a negotiation tactic from them, their camp on whatever the contract was they're negotiating by saying, "Oh, I don't need to go anywhere," which is true.
Let's talk to Auburn. Yeah,
exactly. So. Good on them for being able to negotiate well. Trev also said he didn't want to win the press conference. He wanted to win games. I don't think this was a press conference hire, but it's definitely not a bad one. Like, it's still very exciting.
Think about it. Like, if you hire Dave Aranda, it's like, well, he had the Baylor experience, but it's like, would you really rather have Dave Aranda at this point when it's like, at least Rhule went to the NFL.
Started the thing.
And he went 11, he had the 11 wins, then went to the NFL. So would you rather have a guy who failed in the NFL or a guy who just had 6 wins or whatever with Baylor?
A season Baylor. Yeah, I agree. Man, the Big Ten West feels just wide open than ever. I mean, we beat Iowa, who was about to go.
With Wisconsin
we'll talk
having
a lot more about
coach,
where.
and it's just there. Yeah,
Wisconsin's
so
in turmoil.
Opportunity.
Illinois almost took advantage. Purdue, they're gonna, they're not good at defense. And Braun, he's just barely survived there for multiple seasons.
The 5th and 6th year seniors are gone for Minnesota now. There's gonna be a lot of there's a wide open Big Ten West to be had until, of course, it gets realigned. I did also think it was pretty cheeky having them announce it during College Game Day on the day of the last weekend of the year. It's the Michigan Ohio State game. Do you get to have Matt Rhule on TV this second he's hired? And that can't hurt when it comes to trying to get ahead of recruiting and things like that for Nebraska. So it is really interesting.
Also, a quick mention to Trey Palmer. He's headed off to the NFL, and more power to him. So excited for him.
Makes sense.
We're gonna we'll talk about him a lot more. You'll see him in our Corny Awards.
Yes.
What annual Corny Award? Is this the third annual? Third annual Corny Awards this year. And I'm guessing his name's going to be mentioned with some sweet Nebraska corn for sure. He'll be up there.
Yeah. So drop all of your comments down below, your opinions,
what do you guys
your
think?
hot takes on Matt Rhule and the whole situation, and who you want to see as offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and the rest of the staff for Nebraska, and your thoughts on the potential upside for Matt Rhule or the worst case scenarios for Matt Rhule as well. We'd love to see it all. But as always, guys, I'm Josh. That's Caleb. This has been Backseat Sports, and we will see you next time.
Go Big Red,
baby.